Acts chapter 14, verses 23 to the end of the chapter, and then chapter 15, verses 1 to 4. I changed the title from Elders Appointed in Every Assembly to A Formation of the Early Assembly. It begins in 23, Hierotoni santes the avtis presbyterus kat ecclesian, and having handpicked for them elders in every assembly. Now, the assemblies were growing in especially Judea, it says, in Samaria, and now up into the country of Syria, where Antioch of Syria was located. An elder, interesting word. It appears in Genesis 18:11 first, where it says, and Abraham and Sarah were older, advanced of days. So that's a presbyterus, is age, has something to do with age. In Genesis 24:2 it says, and Abraham said to his servant, to the elder of his house in charge of all of his things. So here a presbyteros, an elder, is a status. Then in Deuteronomy 31:28 it says, hold an assembly for me of your tribal chiefs and your elders and your judicial recorders. And here it was a rank. In Numbers 21:20 it says, and Israel sent ambassadors to Sihon, king of the Amorites, and here it's called an ambassador, it's an office. In Acts 2:12 it says, and your old men shall dream dreams, which I'm an old man. So that's what an old man, so a presbyteros. The Presbyterian Church is named for the rule of the elders. In every assembly, the assembly was not a synagogue. There was a synagogue, which was a gathering, is basically for the Jews. It mentions it in the negative in the New Testament with the synagogue of Satan in Smyrna. But the assembly, it first appears in Deuteronomy 23:2. It says, one born of a harlot shall not enter into the assembly of the Lord into the 10th generation. So here we have the assembly of the Lord, Kyrios. Deuteronomy 31:30, it says, and Moses spoke to the ears of all the assembly of Israel the words of this ode until completion. So now we have an assembly of Israel. Judges 22, it says, and the region established all the people in all the tribes of Israel to the assembly of the people of God, 500,000 men on foot, unsheathing the broad sword. An army, basically, an assembly of people. Judges 21:5. Who is the one not ascending among the assembly from all of the tribes of Israel to the Lord? So we see this assembly mostly is large amounts of people, giants, thousands, tens of thousands or more, and the army 500,000. 1 Samuel 19:20, it says, and coming they saw the assembly of the prophets prophesying. So now there's a few of these prophets. It wasn't a large amount, so it can go either way. 2 Chronicles 30:25, it says, and all the assembly of Judah was glad. Now we have Judah, Israel, people, Lord. Proverbs 5:14, it says, by little I came unto every evil in the midst of the assembly and congregation. And congregation is a synagogue, a synagogue. So the assembly and a congregation. The congregation was more of the fulfilled amount of people. The assembly was coming from someplace, coming together, ecclesia. Matthew 16:18 appears 4 times. It says, by Jesus, and I say unto you, that you are Peter, and upon this, the rock, I will build my assembly, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Now, the assembly in the New Testament is something that Jesus builds. It's not a building. It's not a church. It's not even something that's invented by men to bring them together in a religious orientation. But the assembly, we have to understand that the assembly that is being built by Jesus, it says, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Human institutions called churches, sometimes assemblies, well, Satan does attack them from within and out. A lot of problems in churches. You look at the assemblies in the 4 or 5 chapters of the book of Revelation, with 7 assemblies, and 6 of them were corrupt. It says in Acts 7:38, this is the one being among the assembly in the wilderness, with the angel speaking to him on Mount Sinai. So the assembly in the wilderness is mentioned in the New Testament, and that is about Moses. And then it says, so they gathered them together, having prayed, meta, prosevxameni, meta, nistion, having prayed with fastings, parethento avtus to Kyrio, they placed them to the Lord. Is on pepistev kisan, in whom they had believed. So they're all believers. So Saul and Barnabas, now it says, ke theothontes tin pisidion, ilthon is Pamphilion. And having gone through Pisidia, they came into Pamphylia. Now remember, they were originally all the way down into Derbe and Lystra, and then they came back to Iconium, and then to Antioch of Pisidia. And here that's what it's talking about. Pamphylia is like the state. Verse 25, Ke lalisantes in Pergi ton logon, and having spoken the word in Perga, katevisan is Atalion. They went down into Italia. And we'll go to our map right here. So they were here in Derbe. It came all the way down to Perga. Now it mentions Attalia. It didn't mention that. It's a little village where their boats came in to go. People go to Perga. So now they've come all the way down and they've hit Attalia, where they originally arrived on the continent there. In verse 26, Kakethan, Apeplavsan is Antiochion, and from there they sailed away unto Antioch. Now that's not the Antioch of Pisidia, but the Antioch of Syria, just north of Israel. Othan Isan para the domeni ti harati tu theu is to orgon o eplirosan, from where they were having been delivered up to the favor of God for the work which they fulfilled. So now they're back into Antioch, where God had accomplished the things through them in Asia Minor. Verse 27, Paragenomeni they, and having arrived, Antioch, ke synagogontes tin ecclesian, and having gathered together the assembly, people there, aningilon osa epis and otheos met avton, they announced as much as God did with them. Ke oti enixe tis ethnisi theoron pisteos, and that he opened to the nations a door of belief. They originally went to the Jews of all these cities, but eventually the Jews rejected them, and the people of the nations accepted it. And so now they're relating all of this that happened, wonderful things now for the people of the world. The things of Christ are now available to everyone, not just to Jews. In verse 28, Vietrivon they, Eki chronon uk oligon sin tis mathi tes. And they spent not a little time with the disciples. Now here they're called disciples, the people that are following Christ's teaching. And they're the presbyteros, or all these different levels of people. So the disciples were the general people that were there, I would think. And then chapter 15, it begins in verse 1, Ketinus katelthontes apo tis iudeas, edidaxkon tus adelphus. And certain ones, having come down from Judea, taught the brothers. So here we have a brother. We have physical brothers and spiritual brothers. As far as physical brothers, Jesus had brothers. They're mentioned, their names. There was James and John were brothers, Peter and Andrew. These are all physical brothers. Then there are the spiritual brothers. Matthew 12:50, Jesus says, "For whoever should do the will of my Father in heavens, he is my brother and sister and mother." And then again in 23:8 of Matthew, he said, "But you should not be called rabbi, for one is your mentor, the Christ, and you are all brothers." So we have friends that are in the church, in the assembly, that are brothers. Then it continues, "Oti ean me, that if you should not peritemnisthe to ethi moisios u dinasthe sothene." If you're not able to be circumcised in the custom of Moses, you are not able to be delivered. Now, circumcision, the cutting off the foreskin of the penis, and then this was set up by Moses to, actually was to Abraham, and then it continued down with the Jews. Other societies also have this practice, the Muslims and places in Africa, even ones that are not religious, sort of a tribal tradition. But then these people, Jews, are coming and saying from Jerusalem, saying that if you're not circumcised, you're not able to be delivered. In verse 2, genomenes un stasios, a faction then having taken place, a faction, stasios, interesting word. It says in Psalm 17:14, "But faction and fighting lead to lack." And then in Mark 15:7, it says, "And there was the one being called Barabbas, being bound with the joint conspirators, who with the faction committed murder." In Luke, we have insurrection. In Acts 23:7, it says, "And this, he having said, there became a faction between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the multitude was split." So a faction taking place here between the Jews, and with Paul and Barnabas are bringing this news of the nations. And these Jews are saying, well, they really can't become Christians unless they're circumcised. And then it says, "And not a small inquiry with Paul and Barnabas unto them." So they're arguing, basically, not a small inquiry. "Etaxon anavenin Pavlon ke Varnavas." They ordered Paul and Barnabas to ascend. "Ke tinos alus exavton," and certain others from them, "prostus apostolus, ke presbyterus is Jerusalem, peri to zitimatos tutu." So then certain others from them unto the apostles and elders in Jerusalem concerning this matter. So they're going to go down and talk to the apostles and find out what they have to say about do these people of the nations have to be circumcised or not. In verse 3, Amen un propemphentes hypotis ecclesias, they then indeed, having been sent forward by the assembly in Antioch in Syria, vir honto tin Phoenician ke Samarian. They went through Phoenicia and Samaria. Go back up to the map. So now there's Antioch is here, and this is all Lebanon today, Phoenicia, and actually Syria. Antioch is in Syria, so they go down into Jerusalem. Ek the igumeni ten epistrophin ton ethnon, telling in detail the turning of the nations to all these churches or assemblies in these areas. Ke epiun haran megalin pasi tis adelphis, and they caused great joy to all the brothers. So most people were happy to see the people of the nations now joining in with the teachings of Jesus Christ, but not all. In verse 4, paragenomenos they is Jerusalem, and having come unto Jerusalem, abadekthison hypo tis ecclesias, they were gladly received by the assembly in Jerusalem. Keton apostolon, keton presbyteron, and the apostles and the elders, they all gladly received Paul and Barnabas and whoever went with them. Aningilante osa otheos epise met av ton, and they announced as much as God did with them. That is, Paul and Barnabas, all the things that happened with the nations on their trip into Asia Minor. Next section, we'll continue on down, verse 5, where this brouhaha gets wilder.